Everyone see my screen? Okay, great. So if you're like me, you either grew up or remember watching commercials on how our generation was going to be the generation to end smoking. It was set in stone. We were so ready, and Nickelodeon got us really excited about it. And we all thought we were going to be the generation to end smoking. But just like the vapors from electronic cigarettes came out of nowhere, these new things called vapes, which are they're more commonly known as vapes, came out of nowhere and nearly ruined our chances. So hello, my name is Maya Ibelaidene. I'm a biology major. I work with Dr. Prue Talbot in the College of Natural and Agricultural Sciences. My research is involved in the effects of electronic cigarette flavored chemicals on early embryonic development. And I'm going to be conducting a literature review on that topic specifically. So just for some background, because I want to make sure everybody understands this because it has real world applications and implications today. So first of all, electronic cigarettes are often advertised as safer than tobacco cigarettes. There's no evidence to prove this, but they are usually advertised this way by electronic cigarette companies. And so the danger with this is that pregnant women who cannot quit smoking tobacco cigarettes, once they find out they're pregnant, they often switch to electronic cigarettes because of this false advertising. In fact, 7% of women report using electronic cigarettes at some point during their pregnancy, and 1.4% report using electronic cigarettes in the last 3 months of their pregnancy. So again, this false advertising can become very harmful. In addition to this, electronic cigarette aerosols contain high concentrations of flavors called cinnamaldehyde, vanillin, and menthol. So cinnamaldehyde is just cinnamon, vanillin is vanilla, and menthol is a very popular flavor among cigarette users. And so all of these flavors have the potential to bind to things that are called transient receptor potential. So they have the potential to binding to these TRP channels. They're known as TRP channels. And so these TRP channels are found on embryonic cells. And so because embryonic cells contain these TRP channels, and we know that TRP channels interact with these flavors, we are positing that embryonic stem cells may be a target for flavored chemicals in electronic cigarettes. So if you'll look down here, I offered a little bit of a little simplified animation of what a vape electronic cigarette looks like. They can come in different shapes, but generally all of them have the same 3 components. You have the battery at the end, you have the cartridge, and the mouthpiece. So these flavors that I was talking about earlier, that is the center of the research, those all go into the cartridge, along with other electronic cigarette chemicals. But this is where a lot of them are going to be inserted. And again, these are just bought separately from the vape machine itself and put in by the users. So here are some objectives for my project. In this research, my goal is to conduct a literature review on the effects of electronic cigarette use on embryonic development. Currently, there is no comprehensive literature review that exists in this field of study. And so this can be very detrimental because literature reviews, basically you can think of them as quick guides. And these guides give people an understanding, other researchers and the public at large, an understanding of the current knowledge on a certain topic. So since there is no current literature review on this topic, not only is the information all over the place, but it's hard for people to keep track of what's new and what's known. This review my goal is to determine if flavored chemicals adversely affect early embryonic development throughout their interaction with the TRP channels. And my purpose here is really to provide pregnant women with valuable information on the effects of electronic cigarette flavored chemicals on human embryos. So if you'll turn your attention here to the single cell RNA sequence, this shows how TRP receptors in human embryonic stem cells are presented. So the species that my lab uses, that the lab I work with uses, are H9 human embryonic stem cells. And here I have a heat map. And the purpose of a heat map is just to basically show the magnitude of a phenomenon through the use of color. And so as you can see, there's this sort of dark purplish, bluish background color. And you can think of that as like the control color. This is like nothing's going on here. And on the side here, you can see there are these numbers related to the colors. And so the higher up the color is going to go, the more expressed the TRP channels are in those specific areas. So here we're looking at the stages of human development. And as you can see from these, the information that this heat map provides us is that it shows us that TRPA1 Trip V1, Trip V2, Trip V3, V4, V5, V6, and Trip M8 are all expressed in early stages of human embryonic development. Because if you go up the column here and we look at these early stages, you can see that there are a lot of colors that are correlated with the presence of these trip channels. So why is this significant? Well, now that we know which trip channels are present in early embryonic development, now we can sort of use that to hone in our research and target those channels to see if they adversely affect human embryonic stem cells. So again, down here, I have a little image as well. So these are flavored chemicals that bind to trip channels in human embryonic stem cells. So you can see here, these are all the channels that we identified earlier as being highly expressed in this early stages of development. And along with these channels, there are labels here that correspond to each of the flavored chemicals that can interact with these channels. So for Trip A1, you can see that there are many. There's menthol, ROS, acrolein, formaldehyde, cinnamaldehyde, benzaldehyde, isilin, gingerol, cannabis, nicotine, and acetaldehyde. Basically what these mean. These are, again, just the chemicals that are used to make the flavors that people, essentially is what causes and what encourages the use and addiction of these vape cigarettes. So we can see that there are interactions with Trip A1 with a lot of different flavored chemicals. So this is definitely a channel of interest because a lot of different chemicals can affect this channel. And all the Trip V channels, you can see at least all of them are affected by at least vanillin. Some of them have other interactions like menthol, eugenol, cannabidiol, nicotine, but all these channels are definitely interacting with vanillin. So again, in our research, we're focusing on vanillin and its interactions with each of these V channels. Next, we have Trip M7, which interacts with menthol. Menthol is a cooling agent. And so the reason it's a popular flavor among cigarette users is because it encourages people to continue smoking because it gives you that cooling effect when you smoke. And then finally, Trip M8 has menthol, eucalyptol, isilin, other flavors that are very addicting and people like having in their vape cigarettes. So the progress. So currently I am learning how to use a platform called Prisma, which encourages literature research. And so the Prisma compound basically allows you to make sure that you are accessing all papers that are discussed on your topic. And since my project is a literature review, I need to incorporate any and everything that talks about this topic and condense it all into one paper so that it can be useful for other researchers and for people who are seeking information. So I'm learning how to use that. I'm also beginning sections of my review paper. So a lot of what I've discussed over here is essentially making up the introduction and the background sections of my paper that will be completed. I'm also learning about this research and about the intricacies of the experiments that we've been doing by weekly meetings with my faculty mentor, Dr. Talbot, and my grad student mentor, Shabi. And so I'm interacting with them weekly on these meetings to not only find papers related to what the lab is doing, but also learning how to read these scientific papers, how to get the information you need from them, and how to use them effectively. And so my next steps is that I'm going to complete my Prisma search and make sure I have all the current literature. I'm also going to read and interpret all of those papers so that I can condense them and connect them all together into one paper. And then I'm going to write the results of that research into a final literature paper. So again, I want to emphasize the idea that we need the information to be collective and in one paper because it's more beneficial for researchers to develop a new question based off of the current understanding. And it's also really targeted towards pregnant women so that they can have the knowledge they need to make the decisions that are most beneficial for them. Again, although the commercials might not have been right about which generation can end smoking, based off of this research and the information that we can give to the public, it's not the end of the road. There's still a lot of research to be found, and to encourage people to use their knowledge to make informed decisions is essentially what everybody in science is trying to do, right? And so I'd like to acknowledge Dr. Talbot and Shabnam Edimadi for guiding me and helping me with all my research. And there's also a barcode here if you want to contact me whenever to ask more questions than what you want to ask now. So thank you so much, everybody, for listening. And if there are any questions, I'd love to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Maya. You want to stop the recording now?